When your birthday comes around, do you actually feel excited, or do you secretly wish it would just pass like any other day? If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not broken, because psychology says that people who treat their birthday like a normal day aren't cold, ungrateful, or emotionally detached. In fact, their minds work very differently from what society expects, and those differences reveal something most people never stop to notice. Psychology has an explanation, and once you understand it, the way you see yourself and others like you completely changes. You see, birthdays aren't just dates on a calendar. They're emotional events that come with pressure, attention, and social rules, expectations about how you should feel and how you should react. And while many people thrive in that environment, some minds quietly reject it out of self-awareness. People who treat their birthday like a normal day are often judged through a very narrow lens. From the outside, their behavior can seem confusing. Friends might interpret it as emotional distance. Family members might read it as ingratitude. Others may assume it means the person dislikes attention, people, or is suppressing something deeper. But this interpretation misses what is actually happening internally. In reality, this behavior is rarely about rejection, but about alignment. These individuals are not rejecting joy, connection, or appreciation. They're rejecting emotional rituals that don't match how their mind actually operates. Their internal experience of time, self-worth, and meaning follows a different pattern than what social norms expect. And once you understand that pattern, their behavior stops looking strange and starts looking intentional. For most people, birthdays are emotionally charged because they're socially framed as significant. They're treated as milestones that require acknowledgement, celebration, and emotional expression. There's a cultural script attached to them. You're supposed to feel special, celebrate yourself, receive attention, and enjoy it. But not every mind responds positively to those same emotional scripts. Some minds experience meaning internally rather than externally. Some people process significance quietly instead of performatively. And when a birthday arrives, their response reflects that internal structure. The absence of celebration is not emptiness, it's a different form of fullness. To understand this fully, we need to look at how these individuals relate to validation, social pressure, and self-evaluation. Because the first half of the psychology behind this behavior is rooted in how they define worth, regulate emotion, and process time. One of the strongest psychological traits shared by people who treat their birthday like a normal day is a low reliance on external validation. This does not mean they don't appreciate kindness or recognition. It means their sense of self-worth does not depend on it. Many people subconsciously use birthdays as emotional confirmation. The messages, calls, and celebrations serve as evidence that they matter. Being remembered feels like proof of importance. Being celebrated feels like reassurance. For individuals who treat the day normally, this reassurance is not required. Their sense of value is already internally stabilized. Psychologists describe this as internalized self-worth. Instead of asking the environment to reflect their value back to them, these individuals generate it themselves. They don't need a special day to remind them that they're significant. Their self-respect doesn't spike or drop based on how much attention they receive. Because of this, a birthday doesn't feel like an emotional checkpoint. There's no inner anticipation built around it. No silent expectations that others must show up in a specific way for the day to feel complete. When the date arrives, it registers cognitively, but not emotionally. This trait often develops in people who learn to define themselves internally rather than socially. They may have spent long periods relying on their own judgment, resilience, or self-assessment. Over time, the mind adapts. External praise becomes pleasant, but not necessary. External neglect becomes noticeable, but not destabilizing. As a result, birthdays lose their emotional leverage. They stop functioning as a measure of worth. The person doesn't think, if people celebrate me, I matter. That equation simply doesn't exist in their philosophy. This is why attempts to convince them that birthdays are important often fall flat. Importance to them is not created by a ceremony. It's created by consistency, integrity, and personal alignment. A birthday doesn't add or subtract from that. It's also why these individuals often feel uncomfortable when people insist on making a big deal out of their birthday. Not because they dislike the people, but because the attention feels disproportionate. Their internal sense of self does not require amplification. When others try to inflate the moment, it can feel artificial. Psychology makes it clear that this is not emotional detachment, it's emotional independence. And emotional independence changes how a person interacts with symbolic events like birthdays. Another section of this validation pattern is how these individuals interpret recognition. For many people, it feels like emotional fuel. It boosts mood, increases motivation, and reinforces identity. For others, recognition feels neutral. It doesn't significantly alter their internal state. When someone treats their birthday like a normal day, it often means recognition doesn't emotionally register as a reward. They may say thank you, they may acknowledge the gesture, but internally, nothing shifts. Their mood remains stable. Their self-concept remains unchanged. Psychologically, this indicates a strong internal reference system. Instead of using other people's reactions to gauge their standing, they rely on self-observation. They know who they are, what they value, and where they stand. Internal acknowledgement does not rewrite that understanding. This also explains why forgetting their birthday rarely feels devastating to them. While others may experience disappointment or hurt, these individuals experience mild awareness at most. The absence of recognition does not threaten their identity. It doesn't trigger insecurity. It simply registers as a social detail. This This trait is often misinterpreted as emotional coldness, but psychology shows it is closer to emotional neutrality. These individuals are not withholding emotion. They're simply not emotionally dependent on specific social markers. Because of this, their birthday does not function as a psychological highlight. It doesn't stand out from other days that carry meaning through action, reflection, or personal progress. Meaning is distributed evenly rather than concentrated. The second major psychological factor behind this behavior is the way these individuals respond to social pressure. Birthdays rarely exist without expectations. Even when unspoken, there's an assumption that the person should behave a certain way. They should be happy, available, they should engage, they should appreciate the attention visibly. For some nervous systems, these expectations feel heavy. Instead of excitement, they trigger monitoring. The mind becomes aware of itself being watched. Responses become calculated, emotions become filtered. The person is no longer simply experiencing the day, they're managing it. Not all people respond positively to socially imposed emotional roles. Some individuals experience increased stress when they feel obligated to perform a feeling, even a positive one. Being told to enjoy something can paradoxically make enjoyment harder. For these individuals, birthdays can feel like emotional labor, not because they dislike people, but because they dislike expectations. The pressure to respond correctly, express gratitude repeatedly, and maintain a socially acceptable level of enthusiasm can be draining. Treating the birthday like a normal day removes that pressure. It strips the day of its performance requirements. There's no role to play, no emotional standard to meet. The person can remain in their natural state without explanation. This preference is closely tied to autonomy. Autonomy-oriented individuals experience emotional well-being when they feel in control of their internal responses. When a situation dictates how they should feel, even gently, their nervous system pushes back. This is regulation. The mind is protecting itself from overstimulation and emotional dissonance. By keeping the day simple, these individuals maintain internal equilibrium. People with this trait often prefer interactions that emerge naturally rather than those scheduled around significance. A spontaneous conversation feels more genuine than a birthday message sent out of obligation. A random moment of connection feels more meaningful than a ritualized one. This is why many people who treat their birthday normally still deeply value relationships. They just value them outside of scripted moments. Connection, for them, is about presence, not occasion. Another important detail here is how these individuals experience performative happiness. On birthdays, happiness is expected. There's an assumption that the person should be joyful simply because the day is labeled as special. For people whose emotions arise organically, this expectation can feel misaligned. Their happiness does not respond to calendars. It responds to meaning, safety, and authenticity. When happiness is demanded rather than felt, it becomes performative. Sustained performative emotion leads to fatigue. Even positive performance requires cognitive effort. The brain must regulate expression, tone, and reaction. Over time, this effort depletes emotional energy. By treating their birthday like any other day, these individuals avoid this emotional drain. They preserve energy by staying emotionally honest. If they feel calm, they stay calm. If they feel reflective, they stay reflective. There's no need to exaggerate their emotional state for social approval. This also explains why they may seem more relaxed on birthdays they don't celebrate. Without expectations, their nervous system remains regulated. Without pressure, their behavior feels natural. The third major psychological reason behind this behavior is reflection. For some people, birthdays trigger excitement. For others, they trigger introspection. The date signals the passage of time, and the mind responds by evaluating rather than celebrating. This process is referred to as self-evaluative reflection. The mind begins to assess life direction, personal growth, and unresolved questions. This reflection is not inherently negative, it's simply inward-focused. For reflective individuals, birthdays function as mental checkpoints. They prompt questions rather than parties. Where am I now? How have I changed? What feels aligned? What feels off? These questions require mental space, not stimulation. Because of this, a loud or socially dense birthday can feel intrusive. It interrupts a cognitive process that feels meaningful. Treating the day normally allows the reflection to unfold without distraction. This reflective tendency is often tied to high self-awareness. These individuals habitually examine their internal state. They track patterns, values, and emotional shifts. When a birthday arrives, the mind automatically integrates it into the ongoing self-observation. Celebration, in contrast, feels external. It pulls attention outward when the mind is naturally turning inward. This mismatch creates discomfort, so the person chooses simplicity instead. It's important to understand that this reflection is not sadness, it's clarity seeking. The person is not mourning time passing, they're processing it. They're not avoiding joy, they're prioritizing understanding. People who reflect deeply often experience fulfillment differently. Their satisfaction comes from coherence rather than excitement. A quiet sense of alignment matters more than a momentary high. For reflective personalities, quiet is not emptiness, it's a working state. The absence of stimulation allows thoughts to organize and emotions to settle. On birthdays, this quiet allows the mind to contextualize time. Noise, attention, and social activity can disrupt this process. They pull cognitive resources outward. They fragment reflection. What others experience as celebration, reflective individuals experience as interference. Treating the birthday like a normal day preserves mental continuity. It allows the day to integrate seamlessly into their internal timeline. Instead of standing out as an event, it becomes a point of reference. This is why these individuals often remember birthdays differently. They may not recall what they did, but they remember what they realized. The day is marked internally rather than externally. One of the most misunderstood traits of people who treat their birthday like a normal day is their relationship with attention. When others notice that someone avoids birthday celebrations, they immediately assume insecurity. People often think they must be shy or they don't like attention because they're uncomfortable with themselves, but psychology suggests something far more nuanced. For many of these individuals, avoiding being the center of attention has nothing to do with fear or low confidence. Instead, it comes from heightened social awareness. Their mind is highly sensitive to shifts in social dynamics, especially moments where focus becomes concentrated on them. When all eyes turn their way, their brain doesn't register excitement, it registers vigilance. This is increased social monitoring. When attention is directed at them, these individuals become aware of how they are being perceived, interpreted, and evaluated, not because they crave approval, but because their mind naturally tracks social environments. This heightened awareness can be mentally taxing. On birthdays, attention becomes intensified. Messages arrive back to back. Expectations stack up. Reactions are watched. Gratitude must be expressed repeatedly. For someone whose mind already tracks social nuance, this becomes overstimulation. The brain shifts from experiencing the moment to managing it. Treating the birthday like a normal day diffuses that intensity. It keeps the social spotlight from narrowing too tightly. Without concentrated attention, the person can remain relaxed, present, and authentic. They're not avoiding people, they're avoiding the psychological load that comes with being the focal point. This is why many individuals thrive in group settings when attention is evenly distributed. They're often articulate, thoughtful, and engaged when no one's watching them too closely. But when a moment becomes about them specifically, their internal bandwidth is consumed by monitoring rather than enjoyment. For people who enjoy birthdays, attention often feels affirming. It feels like being seen. For those who treat the day normally, attention often feels performative. When attention is tied to a specific date, it can feel scripted. People reach out because the calendar reminds them to. Conversations follow predictable patterns. Emotions feel expected rather than spontaneous. For individuals who value authenticity, this can feel hollow. It's a sign of low tolerance for symbolic attention. These individuals place less emotional weight on gestures that are driven by social norms rather than personal impulse. A birthday message sent out of obligation does not feel deeply connected to them. It feels polite, not intimate. This doesn't mean they dismiss kindness, they recognize the effort, but emotionally it doesn't land with the same impact as an unprompted message on an ordinary day. For them, meaning comes from timing that is unforced. Because birthdays concentrate symbolic attention on a single day, they amplify this disconnect. The person may feel like they're participating in a ritual rather than an interaction, and rituals, for their psychology, feel less meaningful than organic moments. By treating the birthday like a normal day, they avoid placing emotional weight on something that doesn't resonate with how they experience connection. They preserve authenticity by staying within emotional contexts that feel real to them. This leads directly into another defining psychological trait, a preference for genuine connection over ritual. People who treat their birthday like a normal day often place greater value on depth than on tradition. They're less interested in symbolic gestures and more interested in real engagement. These individuals measure relationships by consistency, honesty, and emotional presence rather than adherence to social customs. A single meaningful conversation holds more value than dozens of birthday messages. For them, connection is not something that peaks on specific dates. It's something that develops through shared moments, vulnerability, and mutual understanding. Because of this, birthdays don't feel like relational highlights, they feel redundant. In fact, ritualized interactions can sometimes feel distancing. When people only express appreciation on socially designated days, it can highlight the absence of that appreciation at other times. For someone who values ongoing connection, this contrast feels uncomfortable. This is why many of these individuals prefer low-key acknowledgement or none at all. They would rather have a consistent presence than concentrated attention. They'd rather feel understood regularly than celebrated occasionally. So if you're someone who treats your birthday like any other day, there's nothing wrong with you. Your mind simply works differently, and your psychology leans toward independence rather than validation.